Hello and welcome to a new engraving tier list, but this time will be different because this time we have original raisins in the
Oh,
column.
hello. Thank you. I was like, this is my cue to jump in. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So what we can do, do you agree with these like tiers? I don't think anything is like worse than C.
Yeah,
Or maybe we can have D if you want.
yeah, like the D tier. I think honestly you could even just go like SAB and then like straight to D, honestly. I think most engravings are pretty good, and then there's like maybe one or two that are like, this is garbage, dumpster, like never use it.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything I think this is pretty decent. I don't think there is a need for the tiers to reflect like emblems being, or not emblems, rather engraves being better suited to more specialized roles or better suited to being more general roles. I think I'm actually just fine with outright saying SAB and then skipping straight to D.
Yeah, because if you get like a Vantage Wrath crit build, that's obviously overpowered. And
yeah.
And in other use cases, it might not be, but we're only caring about its best possible use case, basically.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so for Marth engraving, where do you place it on here?
Yeah, I mean, so the Marth engraving is what? It's +1 might, +10 hit, +10 crit, +5 avoid, +5 dodge. So it's like all positive numbers.
Yeah.
So straight away, I mean, this is like probably going into either A or S, like depending. What are you feeling like?
I think it's S tier because it's also crit +10, so it gives you damage boost, and like even if you just roll for like probability crits on like a tank or something, like let's say you have like a tomahawk or a javelin or a dagger tank, and you're on Ike or something, like you can get those like 30 to 40 crits and it like crit fixes. I was able to have like Marin on Ike on a Wolf Knight roll like 40 crits, just like throwing the Marth engraved dagger, just constantly converting kills she has no business getting on daggers. But outside of that, like it's just free damage, it's free hit, it's free crit, and you also get a little bit of a crit avoid and dodge.
Yeah, it's like it's all these stats at no downside, right? So I do think the only reason to maybe put it in A instead, if I were to do so, is that like while yes, they are all positive numbers, each of the numbers individually is like rather small.
Sure.
And so like it is a good boost, but it's like a good boost on a weapon or on a unit that was probably already good. Do I really need the additional stats afforded by this? Or if I did, were the additional stats afforded by this actually good? Or not good, good enough rather.
Okay.
And so I think that's like
so like somewhere like here, like kind of in between, like low S or high A maybe.
Yeah, it's really got to be one of the two, either like low S or high A. I'm not gonna lie, like maybe this is just personal bias. I'm a little bit sour on it, but very oftentimes I like put the Marth engrave on a weapon and it's like, oh, it's still like 91 hit or something. Like, what was I doing? Like, what actually changed here?
What types of weapons and what units? I'm just curious, like the use case.
I mean, generally, whatever weapon I think I'm just going to be using the most over the course of the next few maps is what I put it on, right? So if there's a particular like axe or hand axe or javelin or dagger or even sometimes a bow, I think I could put it on. I think it'll use it. I think I'll put it on that weapon. To be honest, actually, the +1 might is, I use it to meet like so many different early game benchmarks that actually I think it's probably deserving of like S or low S. That like if it's my go-to tool for just meeting random benchmarks in the early game, I think like absolutely it should just go ahead and do it. Yeah. So yeah, just go ahead, like bottom of S, I think is where it should go.
Okay, and I agree. It can kind of fluctuate because yeah, like some certain units with like low dex on axes, even with this, it's not going to hit fix enough. But it is always just might +1 for free, which is nice. So even if you're like going for like quadding, like on a brave or something, or you know just doubling, you're always just getting extra damage.
Yeah.
All right.
And it should be emphasized, by the way, that just because you put an engrave on a weapon does not mean it needs to stay there forever. You can always just like spend 100 bond fragments to like put it on a random iron or steel you have to meet the benchmark today, and then just move it tomorrow if you need.
Right.
Yeah, like they don't need to be married to the weapon.
Yeah. All right. So for Sigurd, so we can like alternate. Like I'll do my placement and then vice versa if that's okay.
Yeah. Please. Okay. Where do you put Sigurd?
Sigurd, I do think is like high S because it gives you damage, it weight fixes, and it's also avoid +20. So it lends itself to avoid tanking builds, which as we know can literally break the game, or in some cases just allow you to tank more combats. And it also gives you might while reducing weight, which is hugely valuable, especially on units who want like Levin Sword or Bolg. I think Levin Sword is like one of the best weapons in the game, so if you hand like Anna or, you know, even, you know, like Mage Knight Citrine if you want to run that, or Chloe, 11 sword with this engraving, their dex is usually high enough that they hit in one round, but it can be used on other weapons too.
Yeah, I really agree with placing this like over the Marth engraving in particular. I mean, +1 might and -1 weight, like so that's just +1 attack, +1 speed. It's a serious amount of hard stats that you can get from a single engrave. I actually like don't know if there's any like I don't know if there's any engraves that give the same number of hard stats as this one does, right?
Right.
And so, and like you mentioned before, the 20 avoid, even though in general I do value hit plus more than avoid plus, I will admit that for the early game specifically, I think putting avoid +20 on certain weapons and just going onto like avoid tiles can actually just put certain early game chapters completely in checkmate. And like, there's just nothing that they can do to hurt you. So I actually really do value this. Yeah, like thieves on a tile. I think like, I remember. I don't think this is like necessarily the best thing to do all game, but I remember definitely my first impression with Engage was like I put like a Sigurd engraving on a dagger and gave it to Yunaka and put her on a tile and everyone had 0 hit, and I'm like, there's no way I can keep getting away with this, right? Like there's like this has to stop at some point, right?
Yeah, it never stops.
Yeah,
the right build, it just keeps going.
For sure. And then you can just put it on any old weapon, like as you mentioned, like a tome. It's great for as some kind of 1/2 range is great for, just because I mean it is again purely positive stats. There's no downside to it.
Yeah. So where do you place Celica?
So Celica's weird. This is kind of like the first engraving, which is like really specialized, right? Like you look at this and you see the 50 dodge, and then everything else is like kind of okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, what to do with this? I do think that the best use I've found for the Celica engrave consistently has been to put on whatever tome I think Ivy is going to use when she's off like soloing a bunch of like wyverns or
that's great actually.
Yeah, when she's off soloing a bunch of like wyverns or wolves on 13 and 14 in particular. Mm-hmm. And so like, I do think, by the way, like just kind of a blanket statement about engraves, I do think that putting your pre-10 engraves on particular weapons is like one of the more impactful strategic decisions you can make in Engage. Mm-hmm. And in particular, this is one of them. Yeah. So I think even though the -1 might seems like it would be like anti-synergy with the Wind Tome, I actually oftentimes put this on a Wind Tome just because like I know that Ivy is just going to be off soloing all of the wyverns in chapter 14 or whatever. Not 14, 13.
Yeah, 13.
The Fog of War one, right? So it's just like, well, let me just put this on the Wind Tome because it's the weapon that she's going to be using. So even then, though, this is like such niche application that I think I just want to put this in B. Okay. Right? Like this engraves effect, even though I've found smart places to use it, I think that overall the effect that it does is incredibly niche. And also, I think not really that applicable in main game if you're allowing yourself to use Time Crystal. Right. Like I think I actually only came up with that strat for Iron Man because I needed to like push 100% chance of success. And
yeah, you can't get crit on Ivy.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're just playing regular game, then I think it's like acceptable to face random like 5 or 10% crits here or there because you just have Time Crystal and can go back. So, but what do you think about this engraving? Have you like found really good use for it, or?
Yeah, I think B is really fair. I would put it low A or high B, and the reason is it's very like dumb. It's just it weight fixes.
Really?
Sure, you do lose one might, but you also lose 1 weight. So if you are on a fast unit who needs weight fixing, and most magical units that aren't Ivy or Pandreo, because Ivy's build eventually does get high enough where, you know, Bolg is weightless very long term, and then Levin is weightless. It does help weight fix, but it's never so good that it's like I absolutely need it. But it can just help like some of those fast units with low build double slightly more consistently. It's like +1 speed basically and -1 damage.
Yeah, I haven't really considered that. I'm kind of curious then, like, to see whenever you place it, what is the Sigurd one placed on? Because I think like the Sigurd one is kind of strictly better for that purpose, but maybe weight fixing is so good actually you just want 2 copies of it, right? So
yeah, you can. It's like an extra weight fix, but yeah, Sigurd is definitely just way better.
Yeah. I'm not arguing it should be S with Sigurd, right? But yeah, B or A. I think B is pretty fine. Yeah. All right, what do you think of the Micaiah engrave? All
right, Micaiah engraving, I think is tier. I think it's definitely S tier. What do you think? You think?
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I mean, we're kind of quickly running into the problem of like how bloated is our S tier going to be, but I do think legitimately that these 3 emblems deserve it. Yeah. What exactly like? I'm for the people at home, like the Micaiah engraving is -3 might, -1 weight, and then +40 avoid, +20 dodge, which is just tremendous. Right. So like, what do you use this for?
So the most basic use case is if you want to easily break the game, you hand this to Fram, and you have her be your Lucina bonded unit, and you get her early avoid plus 20, or plus 10 to 20 with welling, and she just becomes unhittable bonded shield unit that can bond anyone on your team. And you can do a similar thing with Alir, but Alir gets the A supports with everyone and the damage boost, so it just easily breaks the game. And also on its own, you can just hit such high avoid thresholds with any generic avoid tank build that it could also be a combat build. The damage reduction is almost negligible because you're just an invincible thing that can just move around. Like, you can put it on a Griffin Knight, get it like Lance agility or dual support, and just have a bunch of like unhittable Griffin Knights flying around with like dual support and use different like avoid engravings. And it also can just break the game in its own right, so it's kind of hard to...
Yeah, like plus 40 avoid is just so much extra survivability on a unit that it usually is single-handedly adequate to just like shunt the enemy's expected damage down so low that they will just never target this unit, which, as you mentioned, makes them really ideal for Lucina bonded shielding.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely like anticipating what kind of class you're going to have holding Lucina, you know, whether it be some kind of like usually Lucina bonded shield is best when you do it either flyer to flyer, cab to cab, or like chi adept to anything, right?
Right.
And so just like anticipating what this is going on, I don't mind putting it on like a random iron body art and then turning that iron body art into a shielding art one day.
Right.
Like, I think that's pretty good for Martial Master Lucina, just to have that. And then, yeah, like, frankly, once you just have this engrave put on, like the 40 avoid, 20 dodge, from time to time you need like a little bit more juice in order to like stack their avoid high enough for the enemies to never attack them. But this is a very large part of it, and so I really don't mind putting it here just for the Lucina stress alone.
Yeah. All right, so what do you think about Roy? Our boy Roy.
Our boy Roy. I love Roy, but this engrave is pretty mid. I'm gonna be honest.
You don't like +8 weight?
So like
So
+8 weight. Okay, so I'll speak about +8 weight and -30 avoid in a minute, because these are downsides for sure. I do think that there are some weapons that are just outright capable of absorbing the weight, and it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is something like Steel Dagger, Silver Dagger, Marin in late game. And by late game, I mean like the time when you have Roy Engrave back, right? Like I think if you have a highly trained Wolf Knight or just a highly trained dagger unit in general, that you can probably afford to just reallocate this Roy Engrave onto their dagger, and they will probably have enough build or speed to just absorb this weight and not really care about it. And then they're just getting +2 attack,
right?
which is like pretty good for daggers, I think.
And they need it too.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite good. It doesn't give any plus hit, which is something that keeps me from really adoring this engraving, except again on daggers, which just have very high base hit to begin with. And so that's kind of like, that's kind of keeping me from really, you know, falling in love with this emblem. I think like most oftentimes, honestly, what I do with this in the early game is like, as a joke, just put it on a hammer and like give it to Anna and just run her in and see how many armor knights she can kill before she eventually perishes or something like that.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah, I kind of like doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say one thing about the -30 avoid. Oh, by the way, I'm just going to begin with my conclusion and say it's going like bottom of B, probably.
Okay, sure.
If not D, to be honest. Actually, probably bottom of B. Now, I'm thinking about some really trash engraves, and like they deserve D. This doesn't.
Yeah.
So a note on the -30 avoid. Just for my peace of mind, could you put it in bottom of B real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Please. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The -30 avoid, when the Roy Engrave comes back in late game, can actually like help with some expected damage calculations like very favorably. Like kind of speaking to the bonded shield strategy you mentioned before, you want the bonded shield holder to have like high bulk and the person in the like attack position or whatever to have very low bulk.
Yes.
And the -30 avoid actually like increases the enemy's like
likeliness to
expected
attack.
damage. Yeah, exactly. And so very oftentimes I think this can be a solution to a very strange problem that exists in Engage.
Yeah, if you have like super fast bond target that's on like Wolf Knight and it's like 40 speed and it's like almost as avoid tanky as your other bonder, then you're like, oh.
Yeah, it's like, can you lose some of this bulk, please? And then I think Roy is actually pretty good for that. Other than that, I think the -30 avoid downside is like completely negligible. Like, I don't know. Yeah. If the enemy has like 40 hit, like who cares? The enemy hit goes from like 40 to 70. Okay, like they were probably hitting anyway.
Those are great use cases. I like the lever because like even like on Marin, if you're on like a steel dagger, it gets so light that +8 weight, it'll only slow you down slightly, and maybe she gets high enough build that it's only like 1 or 2 points. But Wolf Knight is so ungodly fast, you don't even usually need like speed plus to run it.
Yeah, it's like who cares?
Yeah, the most like the typical use cases I see it on are like effective weapons on units who do not double. but then you run into hit issues, or just like 3 range weapons, or like smash weapons. Like that's like the main thing.
Yeah, I've seen
Thoron
I think
shit like that.
I think I definitely did either like Thoron or Longbow Roy Engrave my first time, just because like the enemy can't counterattack me was my
so the
thought,
weight doesn't
right?
matter. Yeah, but then if you're not paying attention and they get an attack in, you get doubled for sure if you're on like a slower unit. But I think low B is fine. Like,
yeah, low B is probably pretty good. Tell me what you think about the Leif Engrave.
Leif, I think Leif is an S too. To be
Really?
honest, yeah. You don't
Where
think...
though? Where?
Okay, so it's hit plus 20, weight plus 1.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you crit though. Maybe it's A.
I'm fine with Leif and S. It's just like I'm really hot on the Leif Engrave, so it's like I'm surprised to hear someone else say S.
Well, every time I use Sigurd, Marth, and Leif, like, and all of my playthroughs consistently, these are always the most contested engravings in general. Because like, if you're running crit builds, you're running like 2 or 3 at most, probably closer to 1 to 2. So like your crit like engravings are already spoken for the most part. But then every other, like, all the units that attack want these because it's just free damage, and as long as it doesn't like impact your weight or your build rather too negatively to get your speed to below breakpoint or something, it's just hit plus 20 damage plus 1 and avoid plus 10 as well. So it's like kind of like a semi avoid but huge hit fix with more damage. So I'd think like here low
I think it's wise for you to recognize that like the plus 1 weight, like it exists, but you shouldn't get too sour on it, right? Like especially after especially like a couple chapters after Leif joins, you're getting like Lyn, you can start inheriting speed plus 3. Sometime later you're getting Byleth, you can start rallying. And so I think the weight minus 1 is like you can pretty easily absorb this penalty. And then like you said, it's might plus 1 hit plus 20. Yeah. Which is, in my opinion, like better offensive numbers than the Marth Engrave, than the Sigurd Engrave. And so that's really what I adore about it. I don't mind putting it below Marth Engrave. I think like, yeah, as you mentioned, Sigurd, Marth, and Leif end up being like the sort of most contested engravings for my general purpose weapons. Like if I just have a random like tome or 1-2 range weapon that I want to do most of my combat with, it's probably going to be with one of these 3 engravings or like one of the next ones. Yeah. But I really do enjoy the plus 20 hit. I just think it is oftentimes necessary for me to push my units to 100 hit.
It's also great on hero weapons, which get such low like weight requirement that it doesn't even impact speed at all for almost every forged hero weapon. Yeah, and
the hero weapons like the Revanche Reprisal on like those ones, or do you mean like the Fencer?
Are they like Fencer and Folkvanger? Those are a free add-on now, so I usually allow those when I play the game, and I like evaluate them because they usually scale better than silver, but at base they're weaker than silver and stronger than steel. Sure. But like when you forge them, they're just objectively better than silver because silver's forging costs are crazy.
Yeah, I've seen the forges on those heroes weapons, and I'm like, golly, these things are good. Yeah. But yeah, these are like these are the pre-10 engraves, and again, I was kind of like mentioning earlier, I think like choosing where these will go and like making sure that they're on the correct weapons for the next several chapters of the game is like a pretty important strategic decision. Yeah, in my opinion, it's one that like has really long-lasting consequences because you cannot reallocate them. Right. So yeah, don't do something dumb like I did my first playthrough and just put like Marth Engrave on like Liberation, thinking it's going to work all day. God. It's like, oh my god.
Did you see the video when the game first came out? It was like the best early forge, and it was that +5 with Marth Engrave.
Oh boy, yeah. I remember doing that. I remember doing that, and all the way in like chapter 21 and chapter 22, I was looking at this stupid item in my inventory. Like, can I please have done anything but this? Just like put this on a javelin or something.
Yeah, no, that's rough. I did the same thing too, so.
We all did, right? Come on.
It's a rite of passage.
We didn't know, right? All right, Lucina. So what's the Lucina one? So this is -1 might, +30 hit, +30 avoid, -1 weight.
This one's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, it balances like, yeah.
It does, dude. It does everything.
It does. It's
I feel
so
like this
good.
is S tier too.
It's
because it's okay. Avoid tank, hit fix, weight fix. Like it does literally. And like even hit fix, avoid tank. It's like Jesus Christ. It's like literally like Micaiah doesn't even do that.
Yeah, okay, so the soft stats, the hit avoid is like really good. Like you're going to pick up this weapon, you're going to have 100 hit. The enemy is going to have pretty low hit. And so if you just need like general purpose combat, it's going to be pretty nice. Yeah. maybe I'm like overemphasizing the -1 might downside. Maybe I shouldn't be too afraid of it. But for general purpose weapons, I really do want more offensive numbers.
On
And
Bolg and Levin Sword, though, it doesn't really matter, I found.
I guess so, yeah. Maybe you just like want the -1 weight to create like something in the middle of like an Elfire and a Bolganon, which is probably fine. I would be fine with S, but I would probably want to put this below the other general purpose engravings.
Yeah,
I was going to
like
advocate for A,
We can
but
do A.
I don't mind. Yeah,
We can do A, just to start filling in A. Because it's either low S or high A, which is like splitting hairs. We can put it in A.
yeah.
I think that's
it
fair.
is the like. It is definitely like a sort of power creep as far as hit goes. Like this is kind of like Babby's first solution to your hit rate, right? Like you just equip this and it's like, oh, okay, I just hit everything now. Which is quite nice. And I think like on a first playthrough or an uninformed playthrough, it sort of unlocks the concept that you can reliably get 100 hit through engraves. But then usually what I try to do is I just try to get 100 hit through engraves and supports. Right. And I oftentimes find that the extra 30 avoid is like, or not 30 avoid, 30 hit is like not super necessary. It's a good weapon though, for sure. Or it's a good engraving though, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So for Lyn, I think this one's like this one I think is S tier too. But I think
S tiered.
Yeah. Do you think so or no?
Put it. Yeah. I mean, I think so. But it's like we got to maybe make this S tier white, or do we do like an S plus and an S minus? No, I'm kidding. We don't need that. But I think it's up there. Yeah.
Do you think it's the best engraving, or where do you think it places?
Ooh.
Because it is really, it's actually, and even from other, like I have different angles that you, like I know Vantage Wrath, like I know that's like the thing you use it for, but I have some other things that I can go into in a second, but.
Yeah, I actually, you go into all of it. Like let's unpack why this is really good.
Okay, so even on just like an enemy phase tank build, now obviously everyone plays the game differently. I did a poll for how fast do people play. Like 94% of 1,300 people say they play 7 to 15 turns or more, basically. So most people play probably in a way where you would be enemy phasing a lot. And the LTC and efficiency players is like 6%. But for LTC and efficiency, they want the Vantage Wrath, the crits. You just want to send Panetta in there and just start like wrecking dudes. But for other use cases, if you throw this on a Brave weapon and you roll for those low like 20 to 30 crits, you can convert that into kills. If you run this on like Sandstorm builds, you can like roll for Sandstorms and crits, and then the chance of getting one or both is like insanely high. It's like 95% of seeing one or the other. But there's also just enemy phase builds. Like you throw it on an Ike tank or like a Tomahawk or something, and then as you build up crit meter through Wrath, as you take damage, you start, you stack this crit with that crit, and then you're looking at like 40 to 60 crit rates on a 2 range. And then when you double, your crit rate hits like, I don't know, 60 to 80% to see a single crit. So you can hit like some pretty ridiculous thresholds. And also it's weight -2, which is fantastic for certain units for weight fixing. It does reduce the might by a lot, but it's also hit 40 and crit 20. So it has so many applications, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of odd that like the engrave that gives, might -3 ends up being the one that like is really attractive for critical hit builds, right? Because I remember when I first saw this, I was like, ooh, I'm really turned off by this. I don't want to put it on a killer weapon, because like on a killer weapon, that's like might -9. Right? Is kind of like my sentiment. But as it turns out, this +20 crit on an engrave is like pretty key to unlocking 100% crit if that's your goal. Right. Which is, I think, a pretty admirable goal. So I think like for that alone, it probably does deserve S tier. And then as you mentioned, it's actually so good on different like general purpose weaponry. I actually don't even mind putting it like top 1.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree, actually.
Like,
yeah.
Even so, like, if you're playing super optimal in the game or something, then you put it on a Vantage Wrath build and it just owns everything, right? Like you just have 100 hit, 100 crit. Find the attack, okay? Just find that stat somewhere. Yeah. And then even if you're playing like super lazily, you can just slap this on a general purpose weapon, and it's still actually just really good because it's tons of hit and tons of crit. Yeah. I do remember putting this on. I think this was. I did like a Mage Knight Citrine and an Iron Man, and she was actually rocking a Lyn Engraved Bolganon for most of the game, just for the hit and the weight minus. Interesting. And like her magic was just so high that it's like I really don't mind this -3 might. It's a perfect general purpose weaponry.
Now, was that? Did you say that was a Mage Knight?
Yeah, that was a Mage Knight.
Oh, okay, yeah, because like a lot of the units, a lot of the Mage Knights that aren't, I mean, pretty much every unit that isn't Ivy or Pantrail on Mage Knight has weight issues to some degree. That's a pretty good use case.
It's like it's pretty fine for it, and the plus 40 hit is nice too. And I think like when the game first came out, myself and a couple of buddies, I think we figured out we just put the Lyn Engrave on like a silver great axe, and dude, who cares that it goes from 32 to 20 to 29 might, right? Like you just get plus 40 hit and a silver great axe and just stomp everybody. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, because those things miss all the time. It's so unsatisfying.
It's like, come on, man. And then like, yeah, an enemy attacks you and then you swing with their silver great axe and then the enemy still has like 40 HP. It's like, seriously? Come on, what was the point?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't mind putting this in top one. Pretty much whatever you put it on is just gonna own.
Yeah. What do you think about Ike?
Oh boy.
Weight plus 15 metagame?
Well, okay, so like, here's the thing. With weight plus 15, you just kind of like give up on the whole concept of doubling, right? Like, whatever. There are some weapons for which I don't really mind this. Like, obviously on a great weapon, it's like, this is probably fine. Or maybe on something like a Rider's Bane, it's like, I just intend to one-shot anyway, so who cares if I don't double? It's probably fine being the first one going into D tier.
Okay.
I don't really mind. It's like, yeah, plus 3 might is a very large number, but really what sours me on it is not even the plus 15 weight, it's the complete lack of any hit, right?
Yes,
so it's like, I get plus 3 might, but then I still have to hit them. And then if I miss, I get like completely owned on the counter, right?
And slow units tend to have bad decks, and they tend to want this. So it's like this issue where, like with Roy, you mentioned you throw it on a Wolf Knight. Wolf Knight is high dex just by existing because it's a Wolf Knight. But if you throw this on like a Citrine Thoron or like some Ivy Thoron, like both of those need serious dex fixing. So like, or even just any Thoron. Maybe Pandreo could get away with it because he's like one of the few high accuracy and his passive is insane as hell. He could probably get away with it, but he's probably better off doubling with Bolg anyways.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all these things are just kind of better. I think the one funny application I found of this, and I didn't come up with it. It was like Chair was just a guy who's in various Discords was when I came up with it. Yeah. Was actually the same Mage Knight Citrine. I put it on a Flame Lance and gave it to her for the purposes of doubling late game heroes. Because late game heroes have Triangle Adept, and very often the sword heroes were the ones that were like just hardest for her to deal with. Like if it was an axe hero or a lance hero, they were way down, and she could usually just deal with it.
Wait, do they all have Triangle Adept, or just certain ones?
Certain ones do, right? But enough of them do, and enough of them have swords. It's like, wait a second, actually, if I just like put this on a Flame Lance, like who cares if this thing is like 35 weight? I just automatically double.
That's actually kind of sick, to be honest. Flame Lance.
It's like, this is. Yeah, kind of probably like Flame Lance. And here's the thing, it's like, this weapon, you already gave up on doubling unless you cheated some way in anyway, right? So it was kind of funny. I don't know if it's any good. But then I remember like taking that same file and just going and running through the Divine Paralogs on that game. And Ike Engraving Flame Lance was like actually surprisingly one of her most used weapons, like just to kill dragons on Tiki Paralog, for example. Sometimes it's like that was just the best weapon because it would one-shot. It's not enough for me to elevate it above D. I still think it's like a pretty meh Engrave, and what I did was like funny, but probably not effective, and so I'm pretty fine letting it rest here.
Yeah, I think Roy's a little bit better, because at least like you can kind of deal with its weight.
Yeah,
and it does other things too.
And the minus 30 avoid like actually ends up being kind of an upside sometimes, so I don't mind.
Yeah, with Bonded Shield strats.
All right, the Byleth one, what do you think of that?
I like the hit plus 30, the crit plus 10 is nice. The weight plus 2, certain units can get away with it, so then it just becomes this like really nice weapon, or this really nice engraving. And you also do get crit avoid plus 30 and avoid plus 10. So this is really good on units with good build or on lightweight weapons. I don't think it's by any means like S tier. I think it's like a little bit below Lucina, power-wise.
Yeah. Probably. I mean, like you're putting this on just some kind of like general combat weapon, right?
Yeah.
And I don't really mind that placement, by the way. Just somewhere in A.
Yeah.
Like I think it's pretty good. It is a heap of soft stats, right? And one thing that I do like about Byleth is that it helps me reach my favorite state in the game, which is my units have 100 hit, the enemy has 0 crit. Yeah. Right? Like it does help me reach that state more quickly, where it's like I can very accurately predict what is going to happen this combat.
Right.
I don't really mind the
RNG.
Exactly, yeah. I don't mind the plus crit and plus avoid being small. The plus 2 weight is sometimes a little bit prohibitive. Like plus 2, you're actually really getting into territory of like, maybe I'm losing out on some like doubling benchmarks that I probably could have met more easily with the Lucina Engrave that you see to the left while still getting hit and avoid.
Right.
But I end up using this one like pretty often. Like it's certainly more than any of the ones in B. It just goes on a general purpose weapon and like puts in work from time to time, but definitely less than the ones in S. I think it's actually just totally fine placed here.
Yeah. All right, so Corrin, the crit plus 30 engraving.
Yeah, the crit plus 30 engraving. Crit plus 30 might -2 as well, let's not forget.
Right.
This one's kind of odd because crit plus 30, you know, you might see that and just start like, just immediately pop out of your chair like, oh my God, this is it. This is what gets me to 100 crit. But then it gives hit plus 0.
Right.
So very often you have a brand new problem of like, oh, well, I boosted my crit, but now what?
Exactly, yeah.
My other number is not 100. So what was the point of doing all this?
I ran this on I'm sorry.
So no, please.
I was gonna say I ran this on the Kagetsu Warrior Ike build to get his killer axe to 100 crit rate, and he ran into hit issues at endgame. So that's all I was gonna say. Really,
even with like blinding flash, like activating, and that's so odd to think about. I really wouldn't have expected that, to be honest. But I guess it is like a +0 hit engrave. So yeah, you have like you have a brand new problem with this. I do think probably somewhere in A is still nice though. I mean, the plus crit is pretty good. Yeah. I think my first few, very there. My first few runs, I think what I found to put this on was like an L surge, because who cares if I'm not getting any hit plus on the L surge, right? I just want more crit, more dodge.
Yeah.
And the L surge with the Corrin Engrave kind of like usurped my Celica tome as this enemy has crit and is scary and I need to kill them weapon, right? Because then I could just equip an L surge. Most killer weapons are 1 range, so I could just equip an L surge and counter them anyway. Like I don't really mind that I'll list on them a 1/2. I can just counter the Swordmaster or the Killer Lance guy or whatever with this.
Yeah, and L surge has 10 crit too.
Yeah, and so I don't mind like stacking it with that. You end up with like 40-ish, 50-ish crit. It's just like a generally nice thing to do. I think there is another application for this engrave that I will get into when we get to the Camilla engrave, because the Camilla engrave is pretty similar to this. But I kind of want to dog-ear this engrave for just a moment and leave it maybe here at A.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I think the fact that it doesn't hit fix is an issue. I do think L Surge is actually a lot better than most people realize. Like, obviously you understand the use cases, so you do know, but I've been using it in, I've been doing a ringless no somnil run, and also you can't second seal into different classes.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, so,
what else?
So L Surge, dude, L Surge on Citrine is so good for last hitting. And same thing with Ivy. It's like, oh, this covert's on a tree, huh? Well, guess what? You're dead.
Yeah, just come in there, take him out. Oh my goodness.
The power of water. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Eirika. Our girl.
Yeah, let's see
Eirika.
the Eirika engrave. You have to scroll down and you're staring at his forest page, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so hit plus 40, crit plus 20, and then of course the incoming crit rate and the negative avoid.
Yeah, the incoming. Oh boy.
So this one, I always just throw it on like a Thoron. Same thing with the Byleth sometimes. Like if you throw, I mean, there's other use cases that are better, I'm sure, but if you have just like a team of killers and you want to just have like a Sage staff bot or something, you can just give them a crit, like an Eirika Thoron, and then 1/3 of their attacks convert into a kill randomly. That's like a kind of brain dead use case, but there's definitely, like you could use it on like a bonded shield unit, like the bonded target, because then enemies like, ooh, crit rate and hit rate, huh? And then they'll attack you more. Yeah. So that's
and who cares if the enemy crits, right? You have bonded shield, so you're fine.
Yeah, it just nullifies the damage. So how do you usually use this? Like in a similar way, or?
Yeah, in a pretty similar way. I kind of view this as like similar to Lyn, as like, it's the other. It's the other plus crit engrave, right? Or the other Vantage Wrath engrave.
Yeah.
And I do think it's pretty key to unlocking, in particular, the like Vantage Wrath Leif Warrior thing. If you've probably seen that one before, right?
Yeah.
Where you
switch between killer weapons.
Exactly. Yeah. For the people at home, what you do is you do Emblem Leif, and you just keep him at bond rank 9, so you don't unlock the Master Lance. And like you just don't have the bond combo, and you have a Lyn engraved killer axe and an Eirika engraved killer bow, and then adaptability will make it so you always counterattack with a killer weapon at 1 or 2 range.
Right.
And this is sort of the other engraving that's used to unlock that strategy. And in that strat, actually, I'm gonna be honest, I actually didn't really mind the minus avoid and minus dodge, because sometimes that meant my units just entered Wrath more quickly.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh yeah, please crit me. Like you knocked me down to 5 HP and now I'm in Vantage Wrath range. So I was pretty fine with it. I wouldn't put it in S in my opinion, just because I think
too many downsides.
Well, it's not necessarily that there's too many downsides. It's just that I think the Lyn Engrave had so many extra use cases where it was like, oh, you could just, use it for this general purpose weapon or use it for this great weapon.
Sure.
And, just take a unit and send them off into the yonder on their own and like destroy 1 million enemies with this. But that's not really true of the Eirika Engrave. I do think that the Eirika Engrave like requires some supporting action, whether that be bonded shield, whether that be some kind of like vintage rat setup, where you need some way to guarantee that this -20 dodge is not going to be an issue for you, because unlike the Lyn Engrave, it will be an issue if you just kind of like put it on any old weapon and ship it.
Sure. Do you think where do you think it is, A or B?
It definitely A. Like, okay. I think it's very strong. The B ones are like, these are just so niche. I don't even feel like they can get build out of them. I feel like putting them on like 1 unit for 1 chapter.
Yeah,
right?
Hit plus 40 is still insane for like hit fixing, and then crit 20 is always good. And
exactly.
And no might reduction too is the other thing that's nice about it.
Yeah, it's like you just instantly get like tons and tons and tons of offensive stats. Right? It's pretty good.
Do you think it's like here, like above Byleth, below Lucina? Or where would you place it?
Maybe I'll like put it between Byleth and Corrin, right?
Like here. Byleth.
Yeah.
I feel like these are almost similar in a way, but this probably is more. This is safer to use because you're not like, I have crit plus 20 on me now, like incoming, which can hurt some builds.
Yeah, like I think there's like very clear applications for the Eirika Engrave, but at the end of the day, like it is pretty one-dimensional in my mind. So I'm just going to keep it here in the A. Like the one dimension it operates on is pretty good, but it's still kind of one-dimensional. Yeah,
and it increases risk on units if it's not used correctly too, which can hurt it.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, so Lear.
Woo! This one.
Oh my god, yeah. I think this one's pretty good.
This one's like. The only thing that I don't really like about this is like when it shows, by the time it shows up, I've like probably got all my engraves sorted for the entirety of the game. And so like that's the only reason that it's not just like going in. It's like, well, I just kind of beaten the game now. Let me just like actually legitimately win the game by killing the final boss. But I mean, it's really hard to argue with these stats. It's just tons and tons and tons of soft stats. -1 might, but literally who cares, right? I mean,
you get everything.
You get everything else. So
right.
Where would you put this?
So because its availability is so late, I don't know if I would put it in S, because like by that point in time, your builds are already online. You're probably already like stomping the game if your team is like built correctly. But it is like really good, so I think it's at least like here, like high A tier.
That's true.
Just because of availability. If you could get this thing early, easy S tier, like top 3, I would say. But because you get it so late, it's like. You can give it to Vale. You can turn Vale into a Griffin Knight, get her sword power 2 and speed plus 3, hand her 11 sword with this on it and Marth, and she's good to pop off.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely like upgrades at least one of your units, including potentially one of the new ones. And like you said, if it was earlier, like I'm gonna be honest, if this showed up like when the Marth Engrave showed up, I'd be asking you to make a new tier above S. It's like, okay, this one's got to go up there, like pretty obviously.
Yeah, because the only downside is might -1, which is like you get crit, hit, avoid, and dodge. So you could throw this on like Ivy's weapon, and now she's hit fixed, rolls for random crits now. Doesn't have to worry about incoming crits and is more dodgy, and it's just like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's just everything about the unit becomes better. I even wouldn't mind like putting it to bottom of S, to be honest with you. Like, because at the end of the day, like as I'm looking at the numbers, like here's the thing, right? Like if I'm sat there and just thinking like, oh well, all my engraves are already on good weapons, and I can't take this engrave, which is pretty much objectively better than most of the other ones. And like I'm kind of too lazy to place it. That's not the engraving's fault. That's my fault, right? Like I should just swallow my pride and recognize, hey, this engraving is like going to be good if you just put it on something. So just put it on something. Like I probably should just put it on something.
Yeah. All right, Edelgard.
Edelgard, the other like only positive one. Okay, it's +1 weight, but like I mean, come on, right?
It's basically like Leif to Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah,
that's how I view it. It's like another Leif type.
It's kind of like Marth Engrave, except +1 weight, right?
Yeah, it is kind of similar. It's kind of like Leif, kind of like Marth, because you get the weight, but you do get like less hit fixing, and you also do get the crit. So it's like kind of somewhere. It's like in the similar, like general combat purpose niche, I would say. Well, not really niche, but
yeah, area. For sure. And definitely like of the DLC engraves, I think it stands out as having like the fewest downsides. I think, right?
I think it's here in S. I think it's S because it's basically like Leif, right?
For sure. I think like, okay, one thing for sure, it should be worse than Marth. Like, I think the Marth Engrave is just outright better than this thing.
Yeah.
Like, pretty inarguably. Like this thing has +5 avoid over it, and then like a bunch of other crap. I don't actually know if it is better than Leif, because at the end of the day, like the reason that I really like Leif is because the hit +20, and this doesn't hit the hit +20. This is the hit +10, which I already stated is something I found kind of unattractive.
True.
I don't mind it being an S. I would probably want it like bottom of S again. Like I keep on saying bottom of S, and just like we keep on punting these things down like past one, past the other, but I don't actually mind bottom of S.
Okay, so I like the 10 crit on it, but I don't know. I guess for the hit +20, like hit +20 is like definitely better. I find that like a lot of the builds I run, like with hit +0 or hit +10 to 20, usually that's like more than enough. Like hit +20 is on like low accuracy units. It could just be like the types of builds I run though too. But I do think it's like somewhere in here.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not going to stay at my foot if you place it there. I think this is a fine placement. The only thing I really wanted to say is like this had better be lower than Marth, but I don't mind putting it here then. Yeah.
Okay. I just like the 10 crit because like even if you're just rolling for those low percent crits, like if you get 10, if you attack 10 enemies, eventually it'll crit, right?
Yeah, exactly. You'll get it one day or another.
Yeah.
So. It's pretty good.
Right. Tiki.
These next few should actually be pretty rapid fire. Like I don't like. So what we're about to kind of enter is a pattern of DLC engraves with like pretty substantial downsides, I think. And then we just have to consider each time like whether or not the upside is worth it. So for the Tiki engrave, this is what, +2 might, and then -20 avoid, -20 dodge.
Yeah.
Which, in my opinion, has kind of a similar issue to the Roy and Ike engrave, where it's like, where's the hit? Right?
Sure.
Like, okay, yeah, sure, you put +2 might on this weapon, but then you're still gonna like, you know, you're still going to get in there with like a 70 or an 80 hit rate. Like seriously, like what kind of game plan is this? I'm really not attracted to it.
And if you get hit, you have incoming crit rate now, which is very bad. And you don't get crit rate yourself. So unlike Eirika, where you can actually leverage the incoming crit with like Vantage, like this, you better be killing on might, and that's not as easy to achieve in a single attack.
Exactly. It's like, what's the point of like, you're going to spend a bunch of bond fragments on something just to chance it at the end of the day? Like, what's the point? I don't think this is I don't think this is very good. At least the other minus dodge engrave that we spoke about earlier, the Eirika one, like, at least that one gives you plus hit.
And right? +40 too, which is like ungodly. That's insane. You know, that's like a guaranteed attack.
But this one is like, I'm really sour on it. I'm sure there's going to be like some Tiki fanboy out in the comment section who's like, nah, dude, it's +2 might goes in if you put it on Armor's Layer, but I don't know. I don't really see it. I don't really see it.
Armor Slayer +5, baby.
Yeah, no, boy, we're gonna really own some like Great Knights or something. I don't know. This I don't like this at all.
It's too it's too niche. It's too weird. All right, Hector.
Yeah. I think the same.
Strength +3, weight +3, then +30 incoming crit.
Where's the hit?
Yeah, but even
it's the same issue.
Even then, like, even just like hit plus like 30 incoming crit. I think this one's a little bit better in some ways because at least it's 3 might. So like I view them both as bad, but I think maybe this one is less bad
than Ike.
Yeah. Well.
I'm gonna be honest. Actually, I think this one's better than Ike. You know, like Ike 15. Oh, okay. Here's the thing, right? Like
it is 3 might.
Ike, you get attacked. You're getting doubled anyway. All right, like
you're probably getting one rounded.
Yeah. This one, that one, you're getting owned either way, right? Like, come on.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. So at least this you could bonded this though, and it could be decent because then it's just like it's similar to bonding this, right? You just get might +3.
Well, I think that's better with Hector because I think like the three weight from Hector is like legitimately easier to absorb than the 15 weight from Ike.
Yeah, for sure.
And like it doesn't give plus crit, so it's not as though your strategy is going to be to just crit. Like you're going to have to either like one shot or double. Right. And Hector is equal in capacity for one shotting and slightly better for doubling. So I got to say Hector's better than Ike Engrave.
Okay. Do you think it's still in D tier though? Like based on
it's still in D.
Okay.
It's better, but not that much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Veronica. Sounds great. Look, this is your worst nightmare. It's -10.
If I was ready to like punt an engraving down to D tier for having 0 hit, what am I going to do with one that has like -20? This is rotten.
It also reduces your crit rate.
Yeah, like
there are.
Well, okay, reducing the crit rate. I can live with 0 crit. Okay, like I can live with that. But -20 hits, like sincerely, what? Come on, man. Like.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, the whole point of engraving these things is to fix the hit. And I understand, like, there's probably some builds out there that can fix the hit through skills. You know, maybe some kind of like Lucina inherit, or just really paying attention to the supports on your unit in order to stack up a ton of hit that way. Like, you could probably pretty hit, like, you know, a plus 45 or so extra hit if you just pay attention to the supports. But the thing is, like, I very oftentimes need like a plus hit engrave and some additional supports in order to make this 100.
Right.
And so, like, for Veronica, you're jumping through so many hoops for what is essentially just like Marth engrave number 2.
Yeah. One damage, like, and -2 weight. Those are the real, and then avoid plus 20. But like, there is one use case you could argue, which is defensive weapons. Unlike like your dancer, it's just avoid plus 20. It's avoid plus 20 for free on your dancer.
Yeah,
dodge
and,
plus 20. Maybe it's good just in that use case. Maybe we can justify B.
I mean, you know, I hadn't actually thought of that. I was like, what if I just viewed this as a purely defensive engraving?
Yeah.
It's like, it's okay. I mean,
it's definitely better than these. It has a use case. You gotta have a dancer, right? Bottom of B tier, question mark?
Holy, I would have never imagined to put it there. But I mean, I guess there are some units who perform like purely defensive roles. So I mean, I guess I don't mind.
Yeah, like staff bots, dancers, chain garters. It doesn't, because they don't even attack, right? Like, sometimes they can, but if it's just a pure
the same
utility.
tier as these boys? Yeah, probably. You know what? I never would have thought that this would have gone up there. I was legit about to ask you to like click the gearbox and make 2 new tiers below D to put this one in, but actually no, I'm fine putting it in B.
Yeah, because if we treat it like, who cares about the offensive aspect, and just like, here's weight -2. Yeah. Because shielding art, like, maybe your build's too high for on like John or Fram. Shielding art, you get that weight down, and then you
here's the thing, like,
20.
But before you complain about like, oh my god, you can't just ignore the offensive like downsides. We've already done that on an engrave in S tier. Like, we already did that with a Micaiah engrave, where it's like, who cares about offenses? Not all your units are issuing attack commands. Like, I'm fine putting this here.
Yeah. All right, Sorin.
Yeah. Oh boy, this one's so odd. It's like, again, where's the hit?
It's objectively better than Tiki, though.
Oh, true. But like,
strictly better.
Objectively better than Tiki by 10 avoid. Come on, get out. Just put it there. Okay, cool.
Logically, it has to be better than Tiki.
Let's move on. I think another really easy one to place right now is actually Crom, which is just Sigurd 2, right?
Yeah, we can put that up here, I think.
Yeah, just Sigurd, but better.
And it looks cool, too, so that matters.
True. It does need to be above Sigurd, though, because it just has an extra 20 dodge, right?
Oh, yeah,
objectively.
Yeah, Sigurd 2 with 20 dodge. Crit avoid is good. All right, Camilla.
The Camilla one's kind of hard. Yeah.
It's actually kind of interesting. 30 crit.
1 might, 30 crit. This is Corrin Engrave, except it gets +3 might in exchange for completely tanking all of the avoid and all of the dodge.
Right.
Like, it is going to completely just dumpster all of those stats in order for you to get an extra +3 hit. So there was a build I saw floating around somewhat recently, and I didn't want to bring this up with the Corrin Engrave because I think it actually kind of depends more upon Camilla Engrave, which is actually a Vantage Wrath Wolf. And what you do is use the Peshcats or the Stiletto in order to do your like crit Vantage Wrathing.
Yeah.
And the reason that this works as compared to like using a Killer Axe is because the killer weapons, the actual killer weapons, have more crit, but they also have like substantially less hit. Whereas the Stiletto's base hit, or the Peshkats, that family of weapons, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, the one range crit knives.
Yeah, exactly. I can't remember like the names of each one in each tier, but like you understand, like Peshkats is the highest.
Yep.
Those guys just have like pretty high base hit, right?
And their damage is good too.
Yeah,
and their scaling is fantastic. Yeah, I actually wanted to start messing around with those. That's interesting. You found a build for them, Vantage Wrath build. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea. I saw someone else do it. But even like, I mean, take a look at Peshkats, right? It's got 12 might, 85 hit, 20 crit. And again, like 20 crit is less than what the killer weapons have, but that's the point of using the 30 crit 0 hit engrave.
Right.
Is that you basically just make this into Killer Axe 2 with substantially more might.
And of course, you're in Wolf Knight, which is accurate.
Yeah, you're in Wolf Knight, which is accurate. It's less attack than Warrior for sure, right? Like, I think what basically happens is you make like a Warrior with 6 range and like no bows, or with 6 move and no bows. You think what essentially happens.
Do you think it's A tier then because of that build?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind putting it like above or below Corrin, like pretty much next to Corrin, because they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
And I won't lie, like half the reason I wanted to bring this up is actually to justify like the joint Camilla and Corrin placement, just because like they're both kind of respectable for that build.
All right.
But I don't think they really, I don't think they have to be decoupled. I think they ought to stay together in the same place.
Okay. All right. How do you feel? Here, let me zoom in. How do you feel about this tiering so far? Do you like it? Anything you would move?
Yeah, looking at it seems pretty good. The B tier, I'm really shocked to see Veronica going into B tier. I absolutely would not have expected that. But you raise a good point, and to be frank, I think that would come up about as much as the silly crap I do with Celica and Roy Engrave.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because like you're gonna have a dancer, and he's not punching things; he's dancing. So give him some
just give him some defensive stats, yeah, just for free. Here you go.
Yeah,
I don't really mind that at all.
Is tanky.
Oh boy,
what the hell? Yeah, he can tank like 1 to 2 enemies just from leveling with nothing, like with no engraving or with like no, like even without a shielding art, like he can tank for no reason. Gone
are the days of like the 17 HP dancer, right?
Yeah, where the enemy looks at them and they just die from a heart attack.
Yeah, he shows up and has like what I can't even remember what it is, something in the mid 30s. It was like it was high enough. I was like, you're fine.
Yeah, and then he levels speed so much. He doesn't get doubled. He has good defensive stats. His health is decent.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good.
He has heal range too for free, which is pretty sick, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like maybe the only controversial thing about this is like the Byleth and the Eirika placement. I think there's going to be some like Vantage Wrath fanboys who could enter and be like, no, the Eirika Engrave should be way higher. But
you could argue that.
Confident.
That's fair. If that's the use case, then yeah, I could agree that could be S. Because then it doesn't.
Yeah,
the downside's negligible. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Here's the thing: if in your mind you've unlocked the Eirika Vantage Wrath, or if in your mind you've unlocked just the Eirika crit stacking build, like you're pretty fine.
Right.
Like you know well enough to use it to not get like baited by it. So I think this is a fine placement.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. All right, so that's it for this one. Definitely subscribe to Original Raisins. He makes pretty good content, and his stream is pretty cool as well. You can check him out on Twitch. What's your stream schedule if you want to shout out, or do you want to shout anything out, or
yeah, my stream schedule is I start either like 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. most days, usually like 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. most days, not Monday. Lately I've been having like a couple of family things keeping me from streaming, but show up in the stream and you'll definitely be welcome.
Hell yeah, dude. All right, thanks for checking us out, everyone. Peace.
Take it easy.